Dr. Judy in her office. And I've been thinking about how I became a teacher. And I've begun to write about that. So I'd like to share a little bit with you. You see, I actually didn't want to be a teacher. I was going to be an actor. I was going to be an actor because I thought I already was one. But something happened. It was at university. Something I expected, and I'd like to share it with you. Somewhere between the actor turned to teacher, I became less the instrument of communication and more the guiding voice. For as a teacher, I could shape the experience in last ways. It was no sufficient for me to have one role. I wanted to eat the whole. I wanted to shape the message and bring the pieces together. I wanted to be part of that ongoing exchange. Where did this come from? What happened? I actually trace it back to my family. My grandfather, Roy Ellis, grew up on a farm in the Ozark Mountains of southern Missouri. He was the second of 6 children, studied by an oil lamp, read everything he could find, and helped work the farm to secure an income for the family. His father, Grandpa Ellis, was both a farmer and a politician, running successful campaigns that placed him in the Missouri Senate. And my mother told me there was always conversation at the table, discussions of important things and big ideas. But my grandfather wanted more education. 8th grade was not enough. So this meant that he had to leave the farm and go to the small town that was close by, Aurora, Missouri, where they had the secondary school. He worked part-time in the public post office and lived above a stable. But he also met my grandmother, Reva Seaburn. Royal was, Reva was the youngest of 9, who also grew up on a local farm in a family that also valued education. She lived in a local boarding house while she went to secondary school in Aurora. Now, this was quite remarkable for a young woman to receive her father's permission to live alone and pursue an education. But the family gossip said that Reva, as the youngest, was spoiled and was the apple of her father's eye. I tell this part of the story because it's important to recognize the similarities between early 20th century U.S. education and what is happening in the 21st century in the developing world. Surely there were friends and neighbors who told my great-grandparents, "You're foolish. You're foolish to invest money in education. After all, what good is it going to do? Royal is just going to be a farmer, and Reva is going to be a wife and a mother." I hear this so often from people. "Dr. Judy, why waste your time on this? Parents in rural areas and impoverished families in the narrow streets of the cities, they have no faith in education. The marginalized will always remain enmeshed in poverty, like father, like son." But I know that stories have different endings. I know parents do care, and that it is a system, those who lead the system, who fail. Royal and Reva were married. He was 19 years old and she was 17. So young, so young, but with an unrecognized strength of will. They both taught in Williams schoolhouses so they could save money, and Royal continued to work in the post office. They were saving so that Royal could study medicine. But it was too hard. It was just too hard. And they could not save enough money for that. So Royal told Reva, I'm going to study the law. He found a law school in Tennessee that gave scholarships to bright, needy young men. So he applied and he was chosen. And they packed their belongings, including my mother, and set out to create a future. Today, we are a family of terminal degrees. We are all lawyers or doctors. I am the lone professor. My grandfather was president of our school board for almost 30 years, and my mother was the first woman elected to that board. My family has been committed to the concept that education changes people, and it changes the way we see the world. So, in my junior year, I changed my major at Northwestern. I took 2 required courses in the School of Education. I did my student teaching, and I married my college sweetheart and set out to educate the world. I want it to stop. But maybe not. I was, I don't know what I was. But I wanted to tell you a few things. I wanted to tell you that I'm thinking about why I'm a teacher, why I've been a teacher, and I've started to write about it. So I thought I would share a little bit with you today, and you can write back to me and tell me what you think, if it makes sense, if I should start over. All right, um, this is kind of in the middle of what I have written. When I went to Northwestern University, I went there because their school of speech was really outstanding. I had been a high school student who participated in a program between my junior and senior year at Northwestern. And I was sure that I would be able to be successful there. I mean, I had been successful in my little town in Missouri, hadn't I? So, this is part of my story. I have to find it first. Becoming a teacher. Somewhere between my sophomore and junior year, the actor turned to teacher. I became less the instrument of communication and more the guiding voice. As a teacher, I could shape the interpretive experience in lasting ways, and it was no longer sufficient to have one role. I wanted to create the whole. I wanted to be part of an ongoing exchange. Where did this come from, you ask? What happened? This is what I've been asking myself. And I trace it back to my family. My grandfather, Royal Ellis, grew up on a farm in the Ozark Mountains of southern Missouri. He was the second of 6 children, and he studied by an oil lamp when he was younger. He read everything he could find and helped work the farm to secure an income for the family. His father, Grandpa Ellis, was both a farmer and a politician, running successful campaigns that placed him in the Missouri Senate. My mother told me that there was always conversation, always discussion about big ideas and important things. Royal wanted an education. It was not enough for him to be a farmer, but this required that he leave home. He had to live in a small adjacent town, Aurora, Missouri. He worked part-time at the post office, and he lived above a stable. But he also met Reba Seaver, the youngest of 9, who grew up in another local farm in another family that valued education. Reba lived in a local boarding house in Aurora while attending secondary school. Now you have to imagine how remarkable it was for her to receive permission from her father to live alone and to pursue an education. It was absolutely unheard of. But the family gossip says that Reba was quite spoiled, and she was also the apple of her father's eye. I have to find out where I put the next piece. I tell this part of my story because it's important to recognize the similarities between U.S. 20th century U.S. education and the current status of education in much of the rest of the world. Surely, 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 there were friends and neighbors who told my great-grandparents, "You are foolish. You shouldn't invest your time and your money in these two children. After all, what good is it going to do? Royal is just going to be a farmer, and Rita is just going to be a wife and a mother." And how often I hear this from people. "Dr. Judy, why waste your time? Parents in rural areas, impoverished families in the narrow streets of the cities, they have no faith in education. The marginalized will remain enmeshed in poverty, like father, like son." But I know stories have different endings. I know parents do care. It is the system and those who lead the system who fail. So Royal and Reva married. He was 19 years old and she was 17. So young, but with unrecognized strength of will. They both taught in one-room schoolhouses. Royal continued to work at the post office. They were saving money so Royal could study medicine. But it was just too hard to save sufficient funds. So my grandfather told Rita, "I'm going to study the law. I think we can save enough for that." So my grandfather applied to a law school he had found in Tennessee. He gave scholarships to bright, needy young men. He applied, and he was chosen. So they packed up all their belongings, including my mother, and set off to create a future. Today, we are a family of terminal degrees. We are all lawyers or doctors. I am the lone professor. My grandfather Royal was president of the school board for almost 30 years, and my mother was the first woman elected to that board. The family was committed. They were deeply committed to the concept of public education. So, in my junior year at Northwestern, I changed my major. I took 2 required courses at the School of Education. I did my student teaching. I married my college sweetheart, and I set out to educate the world. Let me know what you think.